Daniel Suarez will join Spire Motorsports in 2026, and Kaulig Racing may not be in the Xfinity Series in 2026. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're first going to take a look at a ton of paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Anthony Alfredo's 2025 Roth ID Halloween scheme that we'll see this weekend in Martinsville. I love the look of this car. I think the design of it looks fantastic. The colors on it look really, really great. Love it. Looking forward to on the racetrack in Martinsville. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is My Cider's 2025 Sour Boys Halloween scheme that we'll see this weekend in Martinsville. Like the other one, I love the Halloween look to this car. I think it looks really strong, looks really great. Looking forward to seeing on the track in Martinsville. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Jeremy Clements' 2025 Spartan Waste Halloween scheme that we'll see this weekend in Martinsville. It's got a good look to it. Not as good as the normal Spartan Waste scheme that I see from Jeremy Clements, but I think it's got a good and solid look to it. It does have some good look to the car. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Chris Buescher's 2025 Core Power Kroger scheme that we'll see this weekend at Martinsville. Not the biggest fan of this car, to be honest. I don't love the simplicity as much of this car compared to the other one. It probably looked better as it's just a rendering to me. It could definitely be better, but it's not the worst one we've seen from RFK this year. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Thomas Danuzzi got his 2025 Wilhelmina scheme that we'll see this weekend at Martinsville. I do like the look of this car, to be honest. I think it's cool that he's going to be a model with this company going forward. I think it's a solid looking car, and I think it's got some good looks to it. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Cody Ware's 2025 Rexilla scheme that we'll see this weekend at Martinsville. Pretty interesting. They've got a Kickstreamer being part of the group now. I think it's an interesting car for sure. I think it's something to look at. It's kind of interesting. We got someone from the Kick scene coming in and working with the team this year. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Zane Smith's 2026 Pilot Flying J scheme that we'll see next year. This has a little bit of a different look to it for 2026. I gotta say, I actually like the look of this car. I think Ryan Williams and her team over there actually did a really solid job on this one. This car looks really, really good. I like the look to it. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Dean Thompson's 2025 Thompson Pipe Group Halloween scheme that we'll see this weekend at Martinsville. I gotta be honest, this one's alright in my opinion, but it's probably one of my least favorite Halloween schemes we have seen this year. It's got a decent look to it, but it don't look amazing by a stretch of imagination. It's alright, but it's not fantastic. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Tony Breidenger's 2025 Persine Auction scheme that we'll see next weekend at Phoenix. I love the simplistic look to this truck, to be honest. I think it's actually one of the better Tony Breidinger trucks, but she's had some nice looking cars and some pretty good sponsors coming on. Say what you want to say about her performance. I think it's a solid looking truck for sure, and it's pretty good to see it out of Phoenix. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Sammy Smith's 2026 TMC Transportation scheme that we'll see next year. They've updated this car for 2026, and I think it actually does look pretty good in my opinion. The colors on it look pretty solid, and I think that once again, Ryan Williams did a pretty good job on this one. The colors on it pop, and they do look really, really good. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ben Rowe's 2025 Campers Inn Halloween scheme that we'll see tonight at Martinsville. This scheme could be a lot better, in my opinion, if there were some different things done to the car for sure. It's not as good as other paint schemes we've seen from the ThorSport team this year. It definitely could be better. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Sammy Smith's 2026 Allstate Peterbilt scheme that we'll see next season. I think this car looks alright. Probably my least favorite one I've seen. I've never been a big fan of the Allstate Peterbilt cars, to be honest. This is my least favorite one of the ones that were released today. It does look alright, but it's not my favorite one that we've seen for next year. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about safety culture. As it was confirmed a couple days ago, the safety culture will sponsor Shane Gisbergen this weekend at Martinsville. Safety culture sponsors Shane Gisbergen in select races this year. Of course, they've gone to victory lane with SVG, I believe, in Mexico City earlier in the year. I believe he actually scored one of his best overall finishes on ovals with this car as well. I think it's a nice looking car. Every time the safety culture car comes out on the track, I think it's one of the best cars that's always out there. I think it's definitely a really solid car, and I think SVG has a really solid chance and opportunity to go to victory lane in this car. We'll see, actually not victory lane, but at least get a good run. We'll see how things go. Good to see the car back on the track this weekend. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Martinsville purses. Every time we have a NASCAR Cup, Xfinity, and Craftsman Truck Series race, Bob Pockrass puts out the purse money for the event. According to Bob, for the Cup race, it's $9,797,935. For the Xfinity race, it's $1,651,939. And for the truck race, it's $782,900. This has pretty much been the same purse money for the last couple weeks, and I would expect that next week is probably going to go up quite a bit with it being a championship event. But for the truck series and the Xfinity series, it's pretty much been the same for a while. I wish those purses would increase for the lower series at this point. And for the Cup series, because of charter payouts and charter allocation, that's the reason why it's up in some areas. But I think it's some interesting purse money. It could be a lot higher, which it was higher for sure. But it's some interesting purse money for this weekend at Martinsville. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Arizona. As it was reported by Adam Stern yesterday, that NASCAR has worked with a farm in Arizona to mow a championship design into a 10-acre corn maze that will probably be featured, I believe, on the NBC broadcast for the championship event, and will be something that fans who are out in the Arizona area that want to go check out a corn maze, with the course being fall time, they're going to be able to have the chance and opportunity, I believe, to go into that corn maze and check it out as well. I gotta say, looking at this design, I love the championship look they've done to it, and I gotta say, it's kind of an interesting way to kind of show your championship design out to the public who may be interested in doing corn mazes, because corn maze is something a lot of people, especially in the Midwest, really, really love doing. And I think that you think about Arizona, it's interesting that, because Arizona, I didn't think Arizona much being about farms and all that. I think it's pretty cool that a farm in Arizona, which of course Phoenix is not that far, is Phoenix in Arizona, so it makes a lot of sense to get something from the Phoenix area and someone to get kind of close to Phoenix to get the chance and opportunity to show something like that. I think it's kind of cool. I like seeing stuff like that. It's pretty awesome, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Austin Beers. Now, last night was a season finale for the Whelen Modified Tour race, and Justin Bonsignor went on to win the race after a lot of chaos throughout the event. A big crash took place, but Justin Bonsignor was able to pick up the win. Now, Austin Beers needed to finish 9th or better if Justin Bonsignor was able to pick up the win. Well, there were only about 8 cars on the lead lap, so Austin Beers just needed to finish where he did. I believe finish around 2nd or 3rd position in the race, and he would come off the corner and win the 2025 Whelen Modified Tour Championship. He is just 22 years old, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he is now the youngest winner and youngest champion in Modified Tour history. Huge congratulations to Austin Beers. He's won quite a few races in the Whelen Modified Tour so far. It has been a breakout season for Austin. He's been really improving over the course the last couple years in the Modified Tour. He's been ultimately a championship contender throughout the years so far. And I think he's done a really solid and phenomenal job behind the wheel. So, once again, congratulations, Austin. Really proud for the young man. Again, I think he's done a really good job behind the wheel at points this year, and he's earned an opportunity to win this championship because he's going against one of the guys who's been one of the best guys over the last decade in modifieds, who's been one of the best we have seen. So I think that it's pretty impressive to see Austin is just 22 years old, who I think has an amazing, great career and a great future and bright future ahead of him in motorsports a long time down the road. I think it's going to be fun to see what he can do over the next few years. Again, congratulations, Austin, on winning the modified championship this year. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Mazda MX-5 Cup. Now, last night we had the Mazda MX-5 Cup race take place in Martinsville before the modified race took place. And we had a wild and chaotic finish. There was a caution with around 3 laps to go in the race. I believe Jared Fletcher might have been leading the race at that point of the event. Caution comes out for a guy running into the outside wall who's basically the last car on the lead lap, and it would come down to a photo finish. It would basically be a bunch of guys running into each other at the end. Coming down the front straightaway, Weston Workman, who's only won a couple races this year, I believe, in this series, got a really good run of the inside. There was a lot of contact, beating and banging. He got the run of the inside. It would make the last lap pass and win at Martinsville by only 3 1/1000ths of a second. One of the closest finishes we have ever seen in the Mazda MX-5 Cup series. We know Mazda MX-5 Cup can be wild and crazy. It's like pack racing a lot of these different tracks, and they haven't really had a lot of big margins for victories. But Weston Workman's won quite a few races over the years in Mazda MX-5 Cup, and the finish, like I mentioned before, was absolutely wild. The TV direction for the broadcast, by the way, I gotta say, was just not that good. It was a terrible broadcast in general, but I think it's pretty cool that a chance and opportunity could come into play where there's a lot of success from that, and I think it was a really fun event for sure to watch. Once again, congratulations, and pretty awesome, obviously, Matt Yoakum helping call the event for sure, but congratulations to Weston Workman on picking up the win. A great and phenomenal event. I love that a meme became a big race like this. Congratulations once again to Weston Workman on winning the winning the race at Martinsville. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Anduril. As it was announced a couple days ago that Anduril will sponsor William Byron in the 2026 through the 2028 NASCAR Cup season, and they'll sponsor William Byron Hendrick Motorsports for 2 races each year through 2028. The 2 races for 2026 are San Diego and Chicagoland. Anduril is one of the biggest defense tech companies. I believe they work with the military, many military branches in the military, like the Navy, the Army, the Marines. I believe they work with a lot of different companies out there, and of course, being heavily involved with helping out throughout the weekend of San Diego. This is a really big deal to see a company like this come into play. They're also going to have association with, I believe, some of the other drivers at Hendrick Motorsports as well throughout this. They're looking to show some of their stuff off in the future. So pretty awesome to see nonetheless, and great to see the Anduril will sponsor William Byron 2026 for a couple races in the 2026 NASCAR Cup Series season. Good to see a new sponsor in the sport and sponsoring a driver in 2026. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Isabella Robusto. As it was announced on Wednesday early afternoon that Isabella Robusto will run the ARCA West race at Phoenix next week, driving in number 2 for ARCA Racing, and AMSYS will sponsor this team in the event. For those who do not know, this is a new organization that will be joining the NASCAR side of things. The person who manages this team is Kevin Conway. Kevin Conway, the guy who won the 2010 NASCAR Cup Series Rookie of the Year, the guy known for the Extends commercials who got into some lawsuits, some legal trouble, if I remember correctly, because the company that basically he had sponsored for a long time, they got in a lot of legal trouble, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, they're going to be sponsoring Isabella Robusto. I am very interested to see how she's going to do. I think she's a very talented race car driver who got better as the season progressed and went on. Yes, she didn't have a lot of flashy runs this year, right, outside of a couple top 5s. But I think she's going to have a really solid chance and opportunity. Now, obviously, there's a lot of really good talent in the ARCA West series, and there's some drivers like Trevor Huddleston. They're going to be really, really tough to beat in this event. But I think Isabella Robusto can take that challenge, and I think she can do a really solid and really good job behind the wheel. I think this is going to hopefully be a solid opportunity. We'll see if the equipment can hold up, because that's one thing I'm a little worried about when it comes to equipment like this. We'll see how things go, and we'll see where things go for Isabella. But because we're still waiting on our plans at this point for 2026. But glad to see she'll get the chance and opportunity to race in Phoenix. Hope she can do really solid and have some really good speed at Phoenix coming up here really, really soon. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Luke Baldwin. As it was announced on Wednesday early afternoon that Luke Baldwin will drive the number 66 for ThorSport Racing next weekend at Phoenix. Luke Baldwin's made a couple starts in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series so far this year. Was really, really impressive, I believe, at Martinsville before unfortunately kind of taking himself out of contention for a potential top 5 or top 10. And he's had a couple decent runs with ThorSport Racing for 2025. Now, ThorSport Racing, we know, has had some solid success in the past at Phoenix. Of course, they went on to win the championship last year with Ty Majeski, who I believe went on to win the race and pick up the victory there. They won other times in the past at this racetrack, so this is a pretty good track for ThorSport Racing. I would expect that Luke Baldwin will have a solid chance and opportunity to potentially show some stuff. I think Luke is a very talented guy. He's won a lot of races in modifieds, and also I believe won some Cars Tour races as well this year. And I think that Luke has a ton of promise and a lot of potential to be a really successful driver down the road. Again, we don't know what his plans are as yet for 2026. I'd have to think there's a chance he could be racing in the Truck Series with ThorSport next year. He's one of the drivers I believe that's being considered for a ThorSport ride on a full-time basis next year. But I'm really interested to see how Luke is going to do in this event. I think this could be a really good tryout for the 2026 season. We'll see how things go for Luke going into next year potentially. But this, once again, is a really strong and really solid opportunity. We'll see how things end up going, and we'll see if he can perform very, very well. This is a good opportunity because while ThorSport has not been as strong this year, they're still a really solid and really good organization. And working with ThorSport, you've got a chance and opportunity to do really well this weekend at Phoenix. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the 2026 NASCAR Whelen Modified Tour schedule. As it was announced yesterday that the 2026 NASCAR Whelen Modified Tour schedule has been officially announced and unveiled. Here's the schedule for 2026. The season will kick off at New Smyrna on February 7th. Then they'll race at Martinsville on March 27th. Then after that, they'll race at Thompson on April 12th, and then they'll race at Oxford Plains on May 2nd. After that, they'll race at Seekonk on May 16th, and then they'll race at Riverhead on May 30th. After that, they'll race at White Mountain on June 20th, and they'll once again go back to Seekonk on July 1st. After that, they'll race at Claremont on July 10th, and then they'll race at Monadnock on July 25th. After that, they'll race at Thompson on August 5th, and they'll race at New Hampshire Motor Speedway on August 22nd, which will likely be their biggest event of the year. After that, they'll race at Stafford on August 28th, and they'll race at Oswego on September 5th. And then they'll race at Riverhead for the second time on September 19th, and the final time they will race will be at Thompson on October 11th. This is a really solid schedule. We've got some really iconic tracks on there like New Hampshire, Martinsville. You've got Oxford Plains on the schedule. You've got Seekonk. You've got Riverhead. There's a lot of really good tracks, and we usually see this unless it becomes a chaotic event. We usually see some really good racing in the Modified Tour, and I think it should be a really strong event for sure for the Modifieds in 2026. It's going to be fun to see how this racing plays out next year with drivers essentially moving to different series, drivers changing series and affiliations they're going to be running. I think it's going to be a fun year next year. I think it's a solid modified schedule. It should be a really fun year, and I think it should be very interesting to see how things are going to go in the Modified Tour Championship in 2026. I love the schedule for next year. It's a solid one, and I'm excited to see how modifieds do end up racing in 2026. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Now, if you were on Twitter a couple nights ago, Auto Racing Analytics put out a couple different charts as we go into the second to last race of the year. There was a chart showing the normal crash rate, I'm pretty sure, and I believe the terminal crash rate as well. And one driver who's been on that list for the normal crash rate is Kyle Busch. I believe only Noah Gragson and Shane Van Gisbergen are ahead at the most likely have a normal crash every single week. Well, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., who has not been the biggest fan of Kyle Busch over the years, basically went after Kyle Busch a little bit in the tweet by saying, it's kind of funny that the guy that called me Ricky Spinhouse is now on the list with all the crashes. Now, I believe Auto Racing Analytics put out a comment showing that Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is actually still near the top of the list, just wasn't one of the top 5. I think he said it was like the 6th or 7th highest. I find it funny that Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is calling out Kyle Busch because we all know Kyle Busch has not been the biggest fan of Ricky Stenhouse Jr. over the years. Ricky Stenhouse Jr., of course, kind of caused a lot of incidents. Kyle Busch wasn't the biggest fan of Ricky winning at Talladega in 2017. And then, of course, in 2018 at Daytona, that's where the nickname really came from Ricky. He caused 3 or 4 big incidents at Daytona, including during the Daytona 500 as well. And Ricky Stenhouse Jr. did cause a lot of crashes through that time. And I think it is certainly interesting that these two, who are now Chevrolet teammates at this point, who could down the road in the next few years be teammates at Spire, it's interesting they don't both so like each other at this point. But it's also funny because I think a lot of people do disrespect Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Yes, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. has gotten a lot of wrecks, and I think it's understandable for people to kind of call him out in a tweet like this. But if Ricky Stenhouse Jr. was in better equipment, I actually do believe that Stenhouse would be a lot more competitive of a driver. I think he is a talented driver, say what you want to say. I think we all could tell that they're not as strong this year as they even were last year. Last year they were extremely consistent and had a lot of really solid pace and speed at 24. Actually, not 24, but 23. They had really, really good speed. And in general, when I think about this, it's kind of crazy to see that we're seeing a rivalry once again kind of pop up that's been up there for quite some time. Because like I said, they both haven't liked each other for a very, very long time. It's no secret that Kyle Busch is not the biggest fan of Stenhouse at this point. So I think it is certainly interesting for sure to kind of look at. And I wonder if Kyle Busch will comment on that. Kyle Busch, again, it's a lot of people are going to say if you want to put Kyle Busch down at this point and make Kyle Busch look worse, this probably is the best time and opportunity to do it, considering Kyle Busch is having probably the lowest point of his career at this moment and at this point. So I'm very interested to see if Stenhouse will say anything about the comment to me on Twitter. He probably won't. He probably won't get asked these questions this week, and Kyle Busch probably won't get asked those questions over the weekend either. Maybe he will, who knows, and if he does, we'll probably talk about it. But it's interesting that the rivalry's kind of brewing up once again between Kyle Busch and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. at this point. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the TV ratings from this past weekend's NASCAR Cup, Xfinity races, and the race at Formula One with the USGP. As it was reported by Adam Stern on Wednesday, the NBC got 2.556 million viewers for the Cup race at Talladega, which is down from 3.127 million in 2024, but it is actually up from 2023 a little bit. Continuing on, as Adam Stern continues to report, ABC got 1.5 million viewers for the United States Grand Prix at Circuit Americas. I do believe that is up around 14 or 15% from 2024, but it's still down over a million viewers compared to the NASCAR Cup Series race at Talladega Superspeedway. Meanwhile, on a more positive side, the CW scored 980,000 viewers for the Xfinity Series race at Talladega, and it did peak at about 1.2 to 1.3 million viewers. This is the most watched Xfinity Series race we have seen in a little bit. We haven't seen a race go over a million in a very long time after a really strong year. This is probably the most watched race we have seen in quite some time. I believe this also is up from last year's race. I'm pretty sure. Let's first begin with the Cup Series side of things. The race, once again, being down by over 600,000. That is still a pretty major drop, almost being down by 600K. Again, I think the playoffs play a part. I think a lot of races being on cable doesn't really help anything either at this point. I've always said this, but we need less races on cable, and I get this time it was on NBC. If this race actually was on NBC and majority races were on NBC, which they absolutely should be doing that at this point, I do think ratings would not have been as far down this year as they've been, even though they probably would be down a little bit because we've talked about the playoffs quite a bit. People aren't the biggest fan of this current playoff format at this particular point, but being down is still unfortunate, right? Because it's been a bad year when it comes to the ratings. I think it was put out there, I think Eric mentioned this on the podcast this week, USA was down like 20 to 22% in viewership, which is absolutely crazy how much it dropped over year by year at this point and how much it did drop. Meanwhile, Formula One, this probably will be the highest rating we get for the remainder of the year, and I think fans of F1 that are U.S. fans should be really happy that they're getting that number because that number is probably going to be way less in 2026 because they're going to Apple TV next year, and a lot of people are not going to be interested in getting Apple TV at this point, so I wouldn't expect that number to be that high in 2025, 26. Maybe it gets around like I'm thinking like 500, 600K, but they're probably not going to publish the ratings from the race on Apple. Maybe I'm wrong, though. We'll get good ratings there. For Xfinity, solid numbers, in my opinion, nearly a million. Although not as far off as Cup as I think we all kind of were thinking. Because there's been times where the Xfinity Series has been kind of close to Cup this year, which shows a lot about stability and consistency with the broadcasting. But it's interesting ratings for sure. I do like some of the ratings that did come out from this past weekend. And again, the ratings I think for this weekend are all right. And I think for Cup, they're not great. They could be worse for sure. At least it did get over 2.5 million. If it was on USA, though, it probably gets less than 2 million at this point. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the 2027 Daytona 500. As it was announced on Wednesday morning that the 2027 Daytona 500 is being moved a week back and will be moved to February 21st of 2027. Now, why are they moving it back a week? The big reason is because of the Super Bowl. It is expected, while not confirmed, it is expected that NFL will once again be extending their schedule into the 2026 to 2027 NFL season, and they're expected to span another week. And I believe I heard a report out there that the Pro Bowl actually will be happening likely the same week as the Super Bowl, I'm pretty sure. So they'll be pushing the race back a week later to avoid the NFL. There's probably going to be people commenting on my video and saying, Daniel, why can't they just run the Daytona 500 on the same day as the Super Bowl? Well, number one, a lot of these TV providers want to have 5 to 6 hours of pregame coverage, especially if Fox takes over it once again, which I believe they'll have coverage, for 2027, I'm pretty sure. They basically are going to want to have a ton of coverage for the Super Bowl. And it would be death news sentence for NASCAR because looking at the ratings, the Daytona 500, I believe in 2025, got like 6.5 million viewers or something like that this year. Meanwhile, the Super Bowl had record numbers with over 127.5 million viewers, the most watched Super Bowl in history. People are going to tune in the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl is the biggest event out there. It's the biggest sporting event out there. While the Daytona 500 is still a big event, it's not as big as it used to be. It doesn't feel as big. That's why they're making this a priority, and NASCAR, I think, is making a really smart decision here to get ahead of this, which could have a big effect on the schedule going forward, and it might also mean we're probably only going to have one off week in 2027, which is unfortunate. Now, I would probably expect the clash to be, once again, 2 weeks prior to that at Bowman Gray or wherever they decide to take it in a couple of years. They could take it to Brazil in 2027, but even though NASCAR wants to go back to the roots at this point. But I think this is a smart decision to get ahead of it at this point, to get it moved up a couple weeks, a week later, and I think it actually is a good decision. I know some will probably disagree with that, but I think it is a smart decision to make, and it's probably the right decision to make at this point, to not put yourself in a really, really bad position, to basically where you're not putting yourself in as big of a terrible position as I think a lot of people think that could happen if NASCAR tries to go against the NFL. You don't want to go against the NFL. The NFL is king at this point. This isn't the 2000s where NASCAR was booming. NFL's bigger now, and going against that is a death sentence, so NASCAR is making the right decision to go ahead and push the Daytona 500 back a week. I think this is the right decision and right call, in my opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about William Sawalich. We did a video covering the story on the channel a couple days back, but it was announced on Wednesday late afternoon that William Sawalich will miss the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Martinsville this weekend. Now, why is William Sawalich out this weekend in Martinsville? The big reason is because he unfortunately has concussion-like symptoms. Now, if you watch the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Talladega last week, there was a massive crash that took place about halfway through the event where William Sawalich got hit really, really hard after Conor Mosek came way back across the racetrack after causing the initial crash, hit the outside wall really, really hard, and William had nowhere to go, and he hit the outside wall a ton and had a ton of damage on the car. They actually had to take him over to the infield care center. Actually, they took him to a local hospital. He was there pretty much overnight and was released around 2 to 3 p.m. 2 to 3 a.m. Central Standard Time. He was released from the hospital at that point. But then there became the questions of, hey, was he going to be out for this week? And they got confirmation he'll be out this week. In his place, Justin Bonsignor will basically be driving the car this weekend. Now, William did release a statement in regards to the situation by basically coming out and saying that he is disappointed that he will not be racing this weekend at Martinsville, but he is taking his health as a precautionary, and he's taking his health as the number one thing at this point. I would not be completely shocked or surprised if William Sawalich is also out of Phoenix as well. It would probably be the safest thing for William. I get William is a lot younger of a driver, but it would probably be safe at this point to go ahead and sit out the final race as well. I get Phoenix is probably not as dangerous as Martinsville because, again, you hit in the back quite a bit, and those concussion-like symptoms can really come up very, very consistently when something like this ends up taking place. So I think that William is making the smarter and safe decision to sit out at least for this week. I think then the big question you have to look at is how long is William going to be out? Will it just be a 1-week thing, or is it going to be a 2-week thing at this point? We're going to have to kind of wait and see what William decides to do and what the team decides to do on that front. But I'm wishing William Sawalich the best. Hope he can get back on the racetrack as soon as possible. We do have a couple months off, so that's probably the best thing he can look for at this point. But we'll see what William decides to do. But we know for sure William will not be racing this weekend at Martinsville. Hope is for him to get better so he can get back out of the racetrack as soon as possible. We'll see if William can be back out of the racetrack in the near future. We'll see if when he does get cleared to return to NASCAR, hopefully in the near future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Landen Lewis. As it was announced early yesterday that Landen Lewis will be moving up to the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series in 2026, as he'll be joining Nice Motorsports on a part-time basis in the 2026 season. Now, he was, of course, on the Happy Harvick podcast yesterday. He confirmed he'll run 15 races with Nice Motorsports in 2026, with him not expected to fill up the rest of that schedule going in the next year. For those who do not know who Landen Lewis is, Landen Lewis, in my opinion, is a very talented up-and-coming driver. Landen Lewis has shown a lot of promise in the lower series. He has made a couple starts in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. I believe he's driven for Hattori Racing, if I'm not mistaken. Has made some starts in ARCA. I think he's got a win in ARCA, I'm pretty sure. And, of course, was this year's Cars Tour champion in 2025. And he's very highly looked at by a lot of people. Kevin Harvick is a big fan of him. And he's also part of the Ron Hornaday development program. And Ron Hornaday, who, of course, is a 4-time Truck Series champion and NASCAR Hall of Famer, has spoken very highly of Landen Lewis. I'm also pretty high on Landen Lewis. Landen Lewis will be 19 at the start of next year and will turn 20 throughout 2026. And we've seen this before where Nice Motorsports will take the chance and opportunity on young up-and-coming talents. You think about Ross Chastain, who came from the short track scene. You think about Caden Honeycutt. You think about Carson Osamar. They've taken chances on young upcoming talents. And Landen Lewis, in my opinion, is no exception to this. He's a very good driver, in my opinion, who I think is actually going to get the best out of equipment next year. Now, what are realistic expectations for Landen going into next year? Number one, don't make enemies. A lot of young drivers, they make enemies on the racetrack. Show you can have some racecraft after, so that out on the road, you can potentially move up to the NASCAR Rally Auto Parts Series next year, and then potentially up in the Cup Series in the future, because a lot of people are really high on this kid and think he's got potential Cup superstardom down the road in the future for his career. The second thing, get better as season progresses and goes on. Go from being a driver in the middle of the pack and try to put yourself in position to win. If he wins a race next year, I think he'll have a good chance to do that. By the way, with Nice Motorsports, they do have decent equipment. But if he wins a race next year, I think then a good team could take a chance and an opportunity on him going into 2027. But I think Landen is earning this right an opportunity. I think Landen is going to have a really strong year next year with this team. I think it's going to be a fun year to watch to see how things go for Landen. I think he's got a good chance to be strong, pretty competitive with this program. And I think this is a great decision to bring him in my opinion. I think he's going to have it's going to be fun to see what he can do in 2026. I think he's going to be a good driver next year. I think he's going to potentially compete for a couple victories next year, especially on short tracks. Great decision, in my opinion, to bring him into the program. I think he's going to have a good chance and opportunity to be good with this team and program in the 2026 season. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about 2311 Racing. Now, if you were on X, if you were on Instagram over the last couple days, you probably saw that 2311 Racing was teasing an announcement potentially for next year. They basically put out a post saying it's been 5 years that we've been doing this. What's next for us? Well, I think that a lot of people are kind of looking at that and saying it seems like they might be teasing a potential pretty big announcement for 2026. Now, I don't know if this has anything to do with the Sam Hunt Racing announcement, which we're going to talk about here in just a short little bit. But it could potentially have that possibility. But I think a lot of people are looking at this and they're thinking about one driver in particular that this announcement could be related to. It's obvious who they're looking at, Corey Heim. Corey Heim is still not officially announced what his plans are going to be for the 2026 NASCAR season, but there's been rumors and speculation up until now where he wasn't even going to have a full-time ride for next year. It's expected that Caden Honeycutt is going to take over the number 11 truck for Tricon Garage in 2026 and have Scott Zipadelli as a crew chief. The rumor that had been going around was that Corey was going to drive part-time for 2311, drive part-time for Sam Hunt Racing next year, and drive part-time for Tricon Garage and not have a full-time thing. But could we see the potential possibility that 2311 finally forms an Xfinity Series program? I think that would be the best thing at this point. Because if you wanted to ask me, of all the drivers coming up to the ranks outside of Connor Zolch, who will be a Cup Series driver next year, Corey Heim is the best guy in the field up and coming. And in my opinion, he should be a full-time NASCAR Cup Series driver. But unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be the case at this point, that they're moving him up full-time Cup. But I think the best thing that could happen here is him being a full-time Xfinity Series driver or O'Reilly Auto Parts driver. I think that would be the best thing for the sport, is him moving up, because I absolutely believe that Corey Heim should be racing full-time on Sundays right now. He's proven that a couple times this year. He's had more top 15 finishes than Riley Hurts has had this year. Riley's only had one top 15 finish in 2025. He's only had like a couple top 20 finishes at this point. It's just kind of sad to see how Riley's not had a good year and hasn't performed very well. Still looking for his first top 10 with only 2 races left to go, by the way. So I really hope this means we're going to see him in the Xfinity Series or the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series next year. Not exactly sure if that is going to be the case. I hope it does happen, because I think he deserves an opportunity to go full-time racing next year. I hope it does happen, where he gets a chance to be full-time next season. We'll see what 2311 decides to do for next year, but I think he deserves to be full-time. Not official at this point, but we'll see what a team decides to do, and we'll see if there's just some teasing some potential new stuff for next year, depending on what happens in the lawsuit, which we'll get to here in just a little bit. But nonetheless, I think it's interesting to see that they're teasing some potential big announcement for 2026. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Zane Smith. Now, we talked about a story on the channel yesterday morning, but it was announced yesterday morning that Zane Smith has signed a multi-year contract extension with Farmer Motorsports and will be with the team for 2026 and beyond. Zane Smith will continue driving a number 38 car for 2026, 2027, I believe pretty much for the rest of the decade at this point. He will also continue working with Ryan Burgundy as his crew chief for the 2026 year as well. It was also confirmed by the Front Row Motorsports admin as well on X that both Noah Gragson and Todd Gilliam will also return to respective rides next year. Noah Gragson back in the 4 and Todd Gilliam back in the number 34 car in 2025. I think we all can agree this year that Front Row Motorsports in general without that veteran experience of Michael McDowell being there, we can all definitely agree that this team has definitely taken a little bit of a step backwards in the 2025 year. Zane Smith, though, without question, has been the strongest driver from Motorsports this year. He's been the only guy that's been consistently up front, competing for top 10s and top 15s. Even though Todd Gillen, I will say, had a pretty good weekend this past week at Talladega, where he finished up in the runner-up position, only finishing by the guy who won the race, that being Chase Briscoe. And Todd has shown some decent speed at points this year, but has not been as strong as we thought. And then Noah Gragson has just not had a great year in general. It's been a disaster season with only a couple top 15s in the last couple months. For Zane, on the other hand, Zane has been their strongest driver this year. He is currently 27th in the points right now, the highest of the front row guys. But I think Zane has more potential to move up going into next year. I think ultimately the goal for Front Row Motorsports going into 2026 is for that team to show a lot more improvement. Go from being a team that is running in the 27 to 30th range to kind of go to that top 20 range. Try to move yourself into position of the Spire Motorsports cars, kind of be closer to them. That's another team that expanded. I think the goal is for all three of them to try to finish in the top 30 in the points next year and try to get even close to that top 20 range. Join the likes of Daniel Suarez and Bubba Wallace and Carson Osabar and Michael McDowell, who will be in that bubble battle, and Ty Gibbs and Chris Busch or Ryan Preece. You want to kind of be in that group who has a chance and opportunity to make the playoffs. I think Zane has all that promise and potential to do that, and I think Zane's a really good guy. Now, all this is pending what happens in the lawsuit, which we're going to talk about the lawsuit updates here in just a short little bit. There's been some new lawsuit updates that have come out in recent weeks. But we'll see how things go for Zane going into next year. I'm hoping Zane can have a strong season with Front Row once again. I hope the team can show some improvement. I think Zane is a really, really good talent. Can drive a car really, really well. I think Zane's earned this extension, in my opinion. And I think it's going to be a fun year to see how Zane can perform in the 2026 year. We'll see where things go with the program next year. And we'll see if Zane and Front Row can show some improvement. I think Zane will have a good chance and opportunity to show that really good potential. And I think there's some improvement that could be potentially coming for Zane Smith next year with Front Row in 2026. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Sam Hunt Racing. Now, many of you have probably seen this on social media over the course of the last couple of days, but Sam Hunt Racing has an announcement scheduled upcoming tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time and 12 p.m. Central Standard Time, about an hour before the cars get on track. They are expected to announce at least one or potentially multiple drivers for their program going into the 2026 year. Now, there's a lot of questions around the Sam Hunt Racing program for next year and how many cars exactly they are going to have for next year. Are they going to have one car next year? Are they going to have two cars next year? Could they even have three cars next year with a potential team not being in the series in 2026? There are a lot of questions surrounding that at this particular moment in point. But the first big question is, who are the potential drivers we could see at the team? We already talked about Corey Heim. Corey Heim has made select starts with the Sam Hunt Racing team this year. There is that announcement with 2311 that we kind of got teased out there. That could be a potential possibility that something like that could be involved with this announcement in some way, shape, or form. And I think that would be interesting. I think Corey Heim is a really talented driver who I've already mentioned before, deserves a chance and an opportunity to move up in 2026. But I think the most likely outcome for this is Harrison Burton. We've been hearing over the last couple weeks since it was announced that Harrison Burton would not be returning to AM Racing in 2026, which are still some big questions on who's going to be over at AM Racing next year. There's a lot of questions on who's going to be going over and who will be taking over that seat at AM, but we've been all kind of wondering where Harrison was going to be going. And the speculation around the garage is that Harrison Burton is expected to go to Sam Hunt Racing in 2026, and that's who a lot of people think will be announced tomorrow afternoon. I think Harrison has earned this opportunity to get this upgrade. Harrison has had a phenomenal season with AIM Racing. He's been, without question, their best driver ever. He's shown a lot of really good consistent pace and speed on a week-by-week basis. Made the playoffs this year. He's had some really strong runs. Had a great run at Bristol not too long ago. He's had a couple top fives with that organization this year. And I do think that Harrison will be really good with Sam Hunt. This is no disrespect to Dean Thompson because it would be disappointing for Dean Rice. I think Dean Thompson has shown a lot of promise and a lot of potential in the NASCAR Xfinity Series this year. He has been very fast and really strong on the track. But he also isn't as good as Harrison Burton. Yes, he brings sponsorship funding to the table, and I think regardless of what team he goes to next year, if a team decides to pick him up, I think that they'll have a good driver on the sponsorship side of things. But if I had to choose between Harrison Burton and Dean Thompson, I'm going Harrison Burton. Harrison Burton has a Cup Series win and 4 Xfinity Series wins. And Harrison Burton in worse equipment has been better than Dean Thompson this season. So I think Harrison will be a better driver behind the wheel. That's what I expect at this point, is that Harrison Burton is probably going to end up over at Sam Hunt Racing in 2026. And I would expect that is probably going to be the big thing that is going to be announced tomorrow. That's not official at this point, and things can change right now at any given moment in time. But I'm definitely 100% leaning toward the fact that I do think Harrison Burton is going to be in the NASCAR Rally Auto Parts Series once again with Sam Hunt. If he goes there next year, I expect him to be a not championship threat, but I think he'll have a good opportunity to run well, and this could potentially position him to be potentially going to Legacy Motor Club, where there's rumors and speculation that Legacy Motor Club could be getting a third car in the future. So we'll see how things go for Harrison going into next year if he ends up over there, but like I said, I would expect Harrison Burton to probably end up over at Sam Hunt Racing next year and probably be in that number 26 car in the 2026 year. We'll see what that announcement is officially for next year really, really soon. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of 3 major stories in today's episode, as we're talking about updates on the 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports lawsuit. Now, over the course of the last couple days, 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports and NASCAR have once again been meeting in court. On Tuesday and Wednesday, there were settlement talks that began between NASCAR and 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports for potential settlement that could take place, where this case could be pretty much be done all together and they could settle on certain aspects of things. Many people theorize that one thing that could potentially cause settlement to take place is that potentially permanent charters could be on the table. They had those talks on Tuesday, then they didn't finish them on Tuesday, and they went into Wednesday having those settlement talks. And basically, those settlement talks pretty much went nowhere, it seemed like. Then on Thursday, they had the summary judgment hearing. Now, they basically were in court for about 3.5 hours on the summary judgment hearing. And according to what Bob Pox and other reporters had noted, there wasn't really anything major that came out of the courtroom. There wasn't any major bombshells that took place. And over the 3.5 hours, nothing major. There weren't any punches thrown or anything like that in the courtroom. Then we had the statement last night, and anyone that pretty much thought there was a potential possibly at this time of a settlement coming from the 2311 in Front Row Motorsports camp can pretty much kiss that all goodbye. Because it doesn't seem like a settlement is going to be happening between NASCAR and 2311 in Front Row Motorsports. Looking at Jeffrey Kazer's statement, he pretty much basically said that NASCAR, it was shown today in the summary judgment hearing, the NASCAR continues to be monopolistic bullies, retaliatory bullies who want to attack us on a personal front, and we're basically going to go to NASCAR, we're going to hold them accountable, and we're going to go to trial in December and hold NASCAR accountable. Now, I was reading up on Matt Weaver's article. I suggest going and read Matt Weaver's articles. I think he did the best job of any reporter out there when it comes to reporting on us. He's done an amazing job covering the story. And other guys like Jordan Bianchi have done a really good job too, but he did a really good job explaining this situation. Now, it was noted by Matt Weaver in his most recent article, there actually is going to be another court situation that's going to happen in mid-November. They're going to meet in a couple of weeks. Now, in regards to the summary judgment hearing, Judge Kenneth Bell did say he's expected to rule on in the next couple of weeks, so probably after the championship most likely concludes. Probably in the middle of November, we'll get a decision on the summary judgment hearing. Judge Kenneth Bell can throw out certain parts of the case. He could throw out NASCAR's counterclaim, where NASCAR has basically countersued against 2011 in Front Row, basically saying that they colluded. And if Judge Kenneth Bell is to throw out NASCAR's countersuit, then all the focus would be completely on NASCAR, and 2011 Front Row would pretty much be off the hook in their situation, and basically that would be taken out. Judge Kenneth Bell could also rule on certain aspects of NASCAR side of things, where NASCAR could have certain things that 2011 and Front Row won. That could be thrown out of the court as well, and we'll have more of that kind of decided in the next few weeks. But I think anyone, like I said before, I think anyone that thought that there was a likely potential and possibility that a settlement was coming between NASCAR and 2011 Front Row, at least at this moment, can pretty much kiss that all to goodbye. 2011 Front Row, it is very clear as day that they want to go to trial. It's very evident they want to go to trial at this particular moment in point, and they're basically trying to hold NASCAR accountable, which I think if you're a fan of the sport, it is very concerning. I think the best course of action that could have happened in this situation is settlement happened between NASCAR and 2011 in Front Row Motorsports. I think if permanent charters were on the table and permanent charters were granted, I think a settlement actually likely would have been reached, but unfortunately because they didn't reach a settlement, it doesn't seem like permanent charters were completely on the table for NASCAR at that point. It's clear as day some of the things that 2011 Front Row wants. They also want to make the sport for a better place. My big question is, outside of the permanent charters, what other stuff does 2311 and Front Row Motorsports want? Do they want more control at the table? It seems like that's something they've kind of brought up, but what exactly are the other things that they want? Because for a lot of this case, they've had a lot of broad statements, but they haven't been exactly specific on what they entirely want. Do they want NASCAR to lose control of the tracks? Because if NASCAR is a losing case, they would lose the tracks and other things. If NASCAR does, in fact, if they go to trial in December, and there's still a chance settlement could come into play, but if they do end up going to trial in December, it would very likely be a lot of things that would happen if NASCAR loses the case. If NASCAR loses the case, the playoff format could go away. There could be changes to certain situations. There could be tracks sold off. NASCAR could be forced sold off tracks. There could be a lot of things that could happen in general that could hurt NASCAR in some way. And it also will affect 2311 and Front Row. I think what 2311 Front Row probably think at this point is that if they win the case, nothing's going to happen to them. Well, I think there's a lot of people in NASCAR that are not going to be happy at 2311 and Front Row, and the charter system could also go away. Judge Kenneth Bell's brought that up as a possibility that the charter system could go away in general, and that would not be the best look for NASCAR or any party at this point, because if the charter system does in fact end up going away, you have a lot more lawsuits coming, a lot of people that are not going to be happy at this point. Something else that was noted, the Driver Advisory Council will be allowed to have their say as well in this, and Judge Kenneth Bell has agreed to let them have their say at this point. But judging by what was said yesterday, it doesn't seem like a settlement is going to be coming anytime soon. I don't think there'll be a settlement. It looks like we're going to trial. I think everyone should have their calendars open in the beginning of December, because it looks like a trial is going to be happening, and I think everyone should probably have their calendars open coming up here really soon in December. And now we're going to jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode, as we're talking about Kaulig Racing. Now, there's been a lot of rumors circulating around the Kaulig Racing team and organization in regards to 2026. But one of the big rumors that has been circulating for next year, as it sounds like the Kaulig Racing may not be back in the NASCAR Xfinity / O'Reilly Auto Parts Series in 2026. There's rumors that they're going to be fully focusing on their NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series program, which Kaulig Racing will be the factory Dodge Ram program for the Craftsman Truck Series in 2026. They're not expected, according to them, be at least either part-time or even in the series at all going into next year. According to what the report is out there currently at the moment, it sounds like that Christian Eckes and Daniel Dye are both expected to go to Kaulig Racing in the Truck Series in 2026. This is according to Kaulig Nation, where both those guys will transition down to the Craftsman Truck Series in 2026. They also mentioned, according to the report, there's a lot of names that are being linked as potential candidates and possible drivers to this program for next year. This includes Grant Enfinger, Tony Breidinger, Daniel Hemrick, and I also believe Jeb Burton was mentioned as a name as well. There was also talk at one point about Cletus McFarland being a candidate for this program. His name is no longer linked as a candidate for the team, so he probably will end up with Brett Jones Racing next year. But let's go through each of these situations. For Kaulig Racing not to be in the NASCAR Xfinity / O'Reilly Auto Parts Series, that would be disappointing. I get it. Kaulig Racing this year, they have not had a good season. They have really struggled this year in the Xfinity Series with their program. This is the first time they have had a winless season since 2018 when Ryan Truex drove for the program, which is almost a decade ago. And that team has had a lot of success at road course and other things, but Junior Motorsports has really taken over on the road course side of things, and their Super Speedway program has not been as strong. And I think you think about the drivers they have. I think Christian Eckes and Daniel Dye are both talented race car drivers, but when you have a team that's really struggling, you fire Josh Williams halfway through the season, and you fire some of the guys that are part of your team, and you fire other people, just bring a rotation of guys into your program, you do start to struggle a little bit and don't perform as well. Beginning with Christian Eckes and Daniel Dye being part of the Kaulig program, because we obviously know Brendan Queen will be part of that program next year. If Christian Eckes with the Kaulig program next year on the truck side of things, I do think Christian Eckes can contend for the championship. Christian was really good in the Craftsman Truck Series in 2023 and 2024. He, of course, went on to make the championship four, I believe, in 2024, finished inside the top 5 in the finale, and won a bunch of races, was really a lot of the year the only guy that could keep up with Corey Heim. Because Corey Heim, like I've mentioned, may not be back in the Xfinity Series or in the Craftsman Truck Series. He may not be back on a full-time stint next year. So I think getting someone like Christian Downer, who could absolutely be a championship threat, he'll probably do very, very good. There's also rumors about Christian going to McAnally Hilgeman Racing, which I think that would be an interesting place for him to end up next year if that's where he does in fact go. I think there's a chance that that could happen also in 2026 as well. For Daniel Dye, we know Michael Waltrip will be very happy about Daniel Dye being back in the Truck Series. I think Daniel Dye has had an alright year for his standards. He's done the best he can, especially for a rookie, and I don't think Daniel Dye is an awful driver. I just don't know if Daniel Dye was ready to move up to Xfinity. He's kind of proven he kind of wasn't ready. He showed some good stuff in trucks last year, but wasn't amazing. But I think him being there makes a lot of sense considering the dealership side of things with dealership and where they officially announced that was going to be officially confirmed that he was going to be over there. Moving on to the other three drivers that were mentioned. Grant Enfinger, Tony Breidinger, Daniel Hemrick. Beginning Daniel Hemrick. Daniel Hemrick going over there would be interesting. There's been rumors of other drivers going to McAnally. There's rumors Connor Mosack may be out of McAnally Hilgeman at the end of this year. Also maybe going up to Xfinity potentially next year. But Daniel Hemrick may be on the move to Kaulig next year. He's driven for Kaulig in a couple races, so it would make a lot of sense. And he'd be a really good driver that could potentially contend for a championship next year. He's a championship contender this year. Could have a chance to win tonight at Martinsville. I think Hemrick would be a solid potential option to go over to this Kaulig program next year if that in fact does end up happening. Moving on to Grant Enfinger. Grant Enfinger, I'd love to see Grant in top-level equipment. He has not been in top-level equipment since 2023. And he contended for a championship in top-level equipment. Got 3 wins in 2023. He's been carrying the CR7 Motorsports equipment. I would love to see him over there. He would be a great addition to the program, a great addition to this team, and I think he'd do phenomenal with this team next year if he was head over to Kaulig. For Tony Breidinger, she's definitely the weakest link of the people mentioned. She's been mentioned so many times out at this point that I think there's a lot of legs to this rumor that she's going to go over there. She's only with Toyota because she brings sponsorship to the table, and as much as Kaulig is going to, and Dodge are going to be fielding it, they're probably going to want someone that brings funding and sponsorship to the table. And Tony Breidinger, she brings a lot of that funding and a lot of sponsorship that's going to be needed to go to this program next year. So I expect Tony Breidinger to be in some way, shape, or form involved with this if they're mentioning this at this point. But let's say Hemrick and Enfinger go to their respective rides. Who goes to McAnally? There's been talk of Haley Deegan going over to McAnally Hilgeman next year, which she would be a massive downgrade if she's in the 19 truck over her. Over Daniel Hemrick, no disrespect, but Deegan's not that great in my opinion. She's not amazing. I don't know what situation is with other drivers in the program. Who else could end up over there at the moment right now? But I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But if Kaulig Racing truly is not back in the Xfinity Series next year, that would also be disappointing. But it's going to be interesting to see who else ends up in this program next year, what other drivers do get chosen for the program in 2026, and who else ends up getting behind the wheel of the Kaulig Racing stuff next year. We'll see how things go in 2026 for Kaulig Racing. And now we're going to jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Daniel Suarez. As it was officially announced and confirmed after weeks and weeks of speculation on where Daniel Suarez is going, it was officially confirmed that Daniel Suarez will be joining Spire Motorsports in the NASCAR Cup Series in 2026, driving a number 7 car. According to the deal, it is only a 1-year deal. Big things to note, they did not announce the crew chief or anything else except the sponsor. Freeway Insurance, which has been with Daniel Suarez since 2022, they will sponsor Daniel Suarez in the majority of races in 2026. There were some outside rumors about Daniel Suarez potentially not having Freeway Insurance in the 2026 year, but now it's expected that they will be there for the majority of races, including in the Daytona 500 as well. This has been probably the worst kept secret, probably since Connor Zilch being announced to go ahead and join up with Trackhouse in 2026. This has been the worst kept secret since it was announced that Justin Haley would not be returning to Spire Motorsports. There's been a lot of chatter that Daniel Suarez was going to end up over at the Spire Motorsports program in 2026, and now it's official that is going to be happening next year. Daniel Suarez, when you look at this move between Suarez and Justin Haley, I don't think this is a massive upgrade. I think this is probably a lateral move for the organization. While I don't think that Daniel Suarez is an awful driver by any stretch of imagination, he's not someone, in my opinion, that's going to set the world on fire in this car. I'm just being honest here. Daniel Suarez has only won 2 Cup Series races, which is one more than Justin Haley. Yes, he does have an Xfinity Series championship. He's got 4 career Xfinity wins, and he does have a truck win in his career, which Justin Haley does have a couple of those at this point. But Daniel Suarez, a big thing he brings is sponsorship with Freeway Insurance, because while Gamebridge and the team have millions upon millions of dollars backing them and billions with Dan Towers, they probably want someone at some point to bring funding with them, and Suarez does bring that funding to the table. He also has more, I guess you could say, aura at this point, because Daniel Suarez does have a country that supports him, and Daniel Suarez let's be real here, makes you feel something. No disrespect to Justin Haley, but he doesn't make you feel anything. Daniel Suarez is going to make you feel something at this point. Now, what are the realistic expectations for Daniel Suarez going into next year? Realistically, the goal for Daniel Suarez is to try to do better than Justin Haley. Try to improve on the equipment. Justin Haley is currently sitting 31st in the points. He only has 1 top 5 and 3 top 10s so far. Daniel Suarez this year has 2 top 5s and 7 top 10s so far this year, including, I believe, a runner-up finish at Las Vegas earlier in the spring. The goal is for Suarez is to try to do better. I don't know if he is going to do better next year. I think it all is going to depend on who is the crew chief of that car. If it's Matt McCall, I think there's a chance improvement's going to be there. This is no disrespect to Ryan Sparks, but Ryan Sparks is not the best crew chief out there, in my opinion. I don't understand why they didn't put Matt McCall as being the crew chief for the number 7. There was talking Matt was going to be the crew chief of that weird 07 car they were going to run with help from Action Express and Jim France and all that. But that didn't happen, of course. I think Matt McCall should have been the crew chief right from the get-go. I think performance actually would have been a lot better if Matt McCall was the crew chief, because Matt has done really good with other drivers. He's won races, of course. I think he won a race with maybe Jay McMurray, if I remember correctly. He also, of course, won races with Brad Keselowski and Kurt Busch as well for multiple years. Matt McCall would have been a better suited crew chief at this point for Daniel Suarez than Ryan Sparks will be. Or they get someone outside. Maybe they bring Matt Swiderski over, and that is a potential possibility too, that they could do that with Randall Burnett coming over to crew chief the 99 or whatever number they're going to use for Conor Zilisch next year. But as for that, I think Suarez, like I said, this is a big deal for him to find a ride next year. Now, the big question a lot of people are going to be asking, will Daniel Suarez stay with Spire Motorsports for more than a year? I'm going to be honest, I don't think so. Unless Daniel Suarez sets the world on fire, and let's say outperforms his 2 teammates, Michael McDowell, Carson Hocevar, I don't see Suarez staying for more than a year at this point. My expectation is that Daniel Suarez is probably going to end up being out of his seat once again at the end of 2026. Probably because of the fact that there's going to be other drivers looking to come in. There's going to be a massive opening of free agency going into next year. Guys like Kyle Larson are technically going to be free agents. Alex Bowman technically will be a free agent. The big one is Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch, a free agent at the end of 2026. It's been noted by Bob Cox, and I've noted this as well. The Spire Motorsports is very interested in Kyle Busch at the moment right now, considering Kyle Busch is helping with their Truck Series program right now. I would have to believe that you're going to see Daniel Suarez. He needs to form really good. If he wants to keep the seat long term, he has to have a really strong and really great season. And to be honest, like I've already mentioned, I don't see Suarez having an amazing season. I don't see Daniel Suarez going into next year and just completely setting the world on fire. I expect him to probably be once again a free agent and probably lose a seat. We're probably doing the same thing over and over again unless Suarez just completely sets the world on fire, because there's other drivers that could be free agents. Bubba Wallace, and we don't even know if he might be a free agent at the end of this year, depending on what happens with the lawsuit at this point and whatever decisions are made right now. He could be moving to another team in the next couple of months. So there's a lot of drivers who could be free agents. You're going to have Ryan Preece is technically going to be a free agent. You're going to have Chris Buescher, who's not officially signed past 2026. You got other drivers who could be free agents in the near future, like a Chase Briscoe perhaps, like a Christopher Bell, who will believe their contracts end in 2026. They're going to go after a lot of different drivers. I don't see Suarez being a long-term play. I think it's a stopgap year, and I think Suarez will probably be out of a ride at the end of next year once again, like he's been. So we'll see how things go for Daniel Suarez going into 26, see if he performed very well. But like I said, I think this will be a one-year deal for Suarez to stay at the team. I don't think he stays with Spire past 2026, in my opinion. So, that is going to be today's long NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Let's go below that and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. How do you think Daniel Suarez is going to do with Spire next year? Do you think he's going to perform well or not? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about Kaulig maybe not being in the Xfinity Series next year? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Later tonight on the channel, we're going to have the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race to be from Martinsville. Tomorrow, we're going to have that Sam Hunt Racing announcement, potential Harrison Burton or Corey Heim being over there next year. We're also, of course, going to be talking about the Cup Series qualifying reactions and the Xfinity review. And then on Sunday, lineup video for the Cup race in Martinsville. And then we'll have the race review for the Cup race as well, potential Shane Van Gisbergen video. And then on Monday, we'll have a NASCAR news video dropping along with reactions to who I think will win the Truck Series championship as well. We got content coming out, people like Haley Deegan, Shane Van Gisbergen, Carl Edwards, Kurt Busch, Kyle Busch, Bubba Wallace, Ross Sash, Jane, Sheldon Creed, Sam Mayer, Frankie Muniz, Kyle Larson, Chase Light, Ryan Preece, including Savon Dodge, Ram, Tony Breidinger, Will Brown, Brian Cam Waters, all the good stuff to talk about on the channel in the coming days and the coming weeks as well, along with Junior Motorsports too. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode. I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, buddy.